something other than vernal pools, you're wrong. So I want to go back to about 2005 when the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service published their recovery plan for vernal pool ecosystems. And this recovery plan says ecosystems, but it's really about species because the Endangered Species Act is about species, not ecosystems. There were about 37 plants covered and a slew of fairy shrimp and frogs and salamanders and things like that. And the primary goals for the plants were population protection. And basically that was, go out and buy as much of the known occurrences as you could possibly buy and protect them. Also protect unoccupied suitable habitat. The second strategy was seed banking, and that is putting seeds in the repositories such as Rancho Santa Ana for future outplanting. The third strategy was reintroduction and introduction. They talked a lot about replacing populations that had been extirpated prior to listing and prior to the recovery plan development. But then there was also this sort of intended to reduce the risk of extinction and to maintain metapopulation dynamics. And so one of the tribes of plants that were covered in all of this are the 8 species that occur in the Orcudi tribe of the grasses. And, I have loved and eaten these guys for years. And I've chased them around many, many times. I've been working on several of them since the 1990s. But the cool thing is that the 2 most restricted ones, Sacramento orchid grass, they're also very photogenic for grass, notice that. And Solano grass are essentially in my backyard. They both occur within 45-minute drive of Sacramento, even closer if you drive fast. So I want to start a little bit with Orcudi today. I've actually, I can recall field trips with members, with people who work for agencies while they sat in the car and I hopped over a fence to check on populations of this plant. This is also really important in the South Sac Habitat Conservation Plan. And I've been monitoring the mother lode of this species since 2005. So it's entirely restricted to Sacramento County. There are about 12 occurrences. 2 occurrences are completely extirpated. Portions of several other occurrences have been extirpated. And then there's these 2 really odd previous introductions. One of them occurred in 1978 in Phoenix Park, which is just north of the Sacramento River. I'll show you now. That was introduced in 1978 because there was a proposal to develop the Phoenix Field vernal pools. And then I discovered while I was researching all of this, that oddest population of all of this plant, which occurred way down south of the Cosumnes River, and it was all by itself down there, and it didn't even occur in a pool that looked like good habitat, was actually introduced in 1974 by some graduate students, one of which is in this room. They went out with several species of Orcudi seeds and sprinkled them in little transects in a few pools out there. So there have been previous introductions of Sacramento orchid grass. And in 2012, this is approximate distribution of the plant, and you can see, I'm not sure this works, You can see this weird introduced population way down there all by itself. There's another introduced one up there. That one's extirpated, this one's extirpated, and this is sort of the center of the universe for the plant. So armed with all of this information, I convinced the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to fund a small trail project to outplant Orchidia viscida. So I chose 2 protected sites right adjacent to one of the extirpated populations, and I picked out 7 pools on these 2 protected sites. And I went out to each of these 7 pools that I'd chosen, and I chose those pools because they just looked like they should have Sacramento orchid grass in them. I didn't do any measuring, I didn't do anything else, but I promise you, I had all of my state and federal permits. So I went out and I flagged the areas within the pools that I thought were suitable habitat. I processed the seeds by taking the paper bags that contained the whole plants I had collected before and squished them really good to break up the plants and scattered them around and GPS'd it in, and that was essentially all I did for these plants. But I will tell you, I planted just before a December rain that dropped an inch of rain. So that was sort of to tackify it to the soil surface so it wouldn't blow away. Lo and behold, the next spring, I had baby orchid grasses in all 7 pools. And later in the year, I had adult orchid grasses in all 7 pools. And I was just jazzed. These are my babies, right? So armed with that, I went after some real funding and submitted a grant proposal to the Central Valley Improvement Project to do some very serious outplanting of Orchidia viscida for the purposes of helping with recovery. Again, these are not mitigation projects, these are actual recovery projects. And so I wasn't stuck with all of the conditions of an incidental take permit or anything else. In fact, my success criteria for these projects is established persistent populations. That would be success. So I chose 15 more pools on 5 sites for this second round of treatments, and they were planted in 2016. The other ones were planted in 2014. I essentially did all the same treatments. These are all on protected land. And so now I actually have some results. Of the plants planted of the pools planted in 2014, remember that's 7 pools on 2 sites, I have a really persistent population in all the pools, running in about the range of 2,000 plants, over a tremendous variation in rainfall years, well below average, and well above average. Okay, when I picked out those 15 pools I planted in 2016, I intentionally picked out some pools that I thought were too dry for this plant, that I thought were very, very on the close to the edge of its hydrologic requirements for occurring. And so I was really disappointed right after planting in 2016 that 2017 was one of the wettest years we've had in a long time. Okay, but then I monitored in 2018, and I actually had an even larger population, and all of the pools had plants. So I'm now working on 7 pools with 4 consecutive years of persistent populations, and another 15 pools with 2 consecutive years worth of populations. But then I noticed that this really high rainfall year produced a lot of plants, But then the next year, which was actually a fairly low rainfall year, produced even more plants. So what's going on with this, right? So remember I told you I've been monitoring the mother lode of this particular plant for a very long time. So this is 14 years worth of monitoring data. And I will tell you that the scale is, the very top bar is 2 million plants, okay? It can be quite abundant in places that light. This is the Kiefer Landfill Wetland Preserve, and there are 8 pools that always have plants. And another 10 to 12 pools that occasionally have plants. You can see the rainfall line, and you can see that there is just no direct correlation between total rainfall and number of plants. And in fact, there's some really anomalous years in here, like 2012, which was when I was supposed to first collect seed and didn't. What happened in 2012, it was an okay rainfall year, it wasn't bad, anything else. About April 23rd, the Kiefer Landfill Wetland Preserve got 1.5 inches of absolutely ice-cold rain. By the time those pools eventually dried that spring, it was 100 degrees outside. And there was essentially no moisture holding capacity in the soil. And so even though some seedlings came up, the plants never matured. Similar occurrence happened in 2016. It wasn't quite as severe. You know, this is not the only long-term data set I have that I'm sort of holding and dangling out there for potential graduate students who might be wanting to work on some multivariate analysis on climatic factors, because rainfall counts, but there's a lot of other things going on in here, including the temperature, when the pools finally dry down, when the first rains occur, when germination occurs. So there's a lot of interesting stuff we can tease out of this data. So I'm going to move on to actually my favorite member of this particular tribe. This is Torian mucronata. I call it Solano grass. But in order to get a grant for working on this grass, I couldn't call it Solano because Solano is outside of the CBPIA jurisdictional limits. So I had to call it Crampton's Toria, right? So there's only 4 known occurrences. I mean, honest to God, 4 vernal pools, right? The Alcott Lake population was extirpated. It probably died out due to stochastic events after being over-collected. There are, in just CCH1, there's something like 39 collections. And that doesn't include the rest of the indexed herbaria of the world. So then there's a smaller pool on private property, and 2 occurrences on a former military antenna facility in Yolo County. There have been a little bit of work done previously on introduction efforts. Rancho Santa Ana did a germination trial for me in 2003 on this that showed only a 2.6% germination. But then John Gerlach worked on a project in Yolo County in which he put some seed out into some created pools, and they did germinate just 2 years after the inoculation. So this shows the populations, including the extirpated population in red. That's the one that I'm going to put back. Alcott Lake is 85 acres. Had I just taken my seed and spread it out evenly, that comes out to less than 1 seed for every 3 square meters. So I chose several sites within Alcott Lake. The wind also blows tremendously there. So prior to putting the seed out, I would rake the surface to sort of stop the seed from moving around, and then joked that if the plants came up in a herringbone pattern, no one would believe it. So anyway, after 20 plus years of absence in Alcott Lake, in 2016 there were 40 plants. In 2017 there were 10, but in 2018 there were 144. So, and I am currently, I got a little extra money, and I am currently putting additional seed out in order to improve the genetic diversity of what's out there. So, quick thoughts, because I'm done here. It is possible to outplant Orchidea and probably other vernal pool plants. They are naturally selected to non-dispersal. The recipient site should be within the natural range and on similar soils. You want to consider genetic diversity both spatially and temporally. Several other taxa, in fact, in addition to green Torian and Sonoma sunshine, I know it's been done with slender orchid grass and several of the agagies in Southern California. And it is an aid to species recovery, and it may eventually be necessary as a buffer to climate change.